today we're going to look a bit more closely at the heart. So the first thing is we're going to have a look at the different structures in the heart. So we've got 4 chambers, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2 at the top, sorry, I don't seem to have completed one of the chambers. The 2 at the top here are called atria, or one is called an atrium. So they are these top ones. You've got one there and one there. These bottom ones are called ventricles. Now, the blood enters the heart in the atria. And an atrium of a hotel just means the entryway or the lobby, the kind of hallway of the hotel. So blood enters into the atria and then it goes down into the ventricles, and then the ventricles squeeze to push the blood out through arteries. So let's have a look at the blood vessels. So you've got 2 blood vessels bringing blood in. You've got the vena cava, which is coming, or vena cava, it doesn't really matter, coming from the body. So that's bringing blood from the tissues where it's being used. The oxygen has been used up. So the blood coming in this side is depleted in oxygen, has less oxygen. This side, you've got the pulmonary vein. Now, anything that has the word pulmonary means lung. So this one is coming in, but because it says pulmonary, that must mean it's come from the heart, from the lung, sorry. It's coming into the heart from the lung. So vein has the word in it, and that's what helps you to remember that the blood is coming in through veins. The blood that will then go down into the ventricles. When the ventricles contract, blood will leave the heart and it goes away in an artery. So A for artery means away from the heart. Now again, this one, pulmonary artery, has the word pulmonary, so it must be something to do with the lungs. So if it's leaving the heart, if it's going away from the heart, it must be going to the lungs. So this one is coming in from the lungs, that one is going out to the lungs. This one is coming in from the body, so this one must be going away, it's an artery, to the body. Okay, so they are the big structures. Now, you've got this bit here which separates the 2 halves of your heart. This half and this half, the blood never mixes. It's almost like having 2 separate pumps stuck together. And what separates them is this band of tissue, this band of muscle called the septum. Now, septum is just something that divides. You have septum in your nose as well, that divides your nostrils. We've got the apex at the bottom here, and then we've got these structures. We've got one there, one there, one there, and one there, and they are valves. So you've got these 2 are shown in their closed position, these 2 are shown in their open position. Now, valves prevent backflow of blood. So if you imagine blood flowing up this way and being able to flow down that way. So you've got a valve in its open position like this. It's going to allow blood to flow down through that open valve. Now imagine you start squeezing from the bottom. It's going to start pushing the blood up. Now you don't want it to go back up into this chamber. So if you can imagine it's this one, blood's come in down there. When it squeezes, we want it to go out through there. We don't want it to go back in there. So in its open position, it's going to allow the blood to go from, say, the atrium into a ventricle. When the ventricle starts to contract, it pushes the blood up and the blood fills these cup structures. And those cup structures, which is the valve, close. Now you can see you've closed off the blood flow. The blood can't flow back up to that atrium. Okay? So that's it open, that's it closed. Now, if there's enough pressure, obviously that could pop up the wrong way. What stops it from doing that, and if you look at the dissection video, you've got kind of tendinous cords. I've called them heartstrings. That's just kind of the common term for them. And they kind of attach the valve. So the valve can close, but those cords prevent them from flipping up the wrong way. So that works there, but it also works here. So in this one, they're going the other way. So they want to be open to allow blood to flow from the ventricles out into the arteries. And when the ventricles start to relax, blood actually gets sucked back down the arteries a little bit. And so these cup shapes again will fill with blood and shut the valve. So open, it allows blood to leave the heart. Closed, it prevents blood from going back. So if these are open, that blood will be able to squeeze out through there. When the ventricles start to relax, the blood gets sucked back a little bit, and that closed position will stop the blood flowing back into the ventricle. So valves prevent backflow. Okay? Right, so let's have a look at how we draw a heart. So pretty much every drawing you ever see of a heart, this is the left-hand side. This is the convention for drawing a heart. That is left, that is right. Now if you think about the heart superimposed on the chest, this is my left-hand side. Okay, so that's the left-hand side of the heart, and that is the right-hand side of the heart. Now the other thing that tells you that this is the left is the thickness of this wall. Now if you remember, I said that this side comes in from the body and goes out to the lungs. This side comes in from the lungs and goes out to the body. So this ventricle only has to pump the blood out to the lungs. Your heart's about there, that's not a very big distance. This ventricle, however, has to generate enough pressure, enough squeeze to push the blood out of the aorta and to go all the way around the rest of your body. So it has to get all the way kind of down to your toes and back. So this left ventricle wall is much thicker than that right ventricle wall. Now while we're talking about thickness of walls, the walls of the atria don't need to be very thick at all. They're going to squeeze the blood down into the ventricles. The ventricles are going to squeeze that blood upwards to go out through those arteries. And like I said, you squeeze from the bottom upwards like that tube of toothpaste. Okay? Now if you looked at the blood as well, this side of the heart is oxygenated. Let me just rub some of these off. So this side of the heart is oxygenated. And again, think about it. The blood is coming in from the lungs, so it's going to be rich in oxygen. So all the blood coming in and flowing down through into the ventricles and then leaving is oxygen rich, it's oxygenated blood. The blood on this side is coming in from the body. It's depleted in oxygen, the oxygen's being used. So this side, flowing through down into the ventricles and then going off to the lungs to pick up that oxygen, this is deoxygenated. So my pen's running out a bit. Okay, so you've got oxygenated on the left-hand side, deoxygenated on the right-hand side, and that septum prevents them from mixing. You want as much oxygen going to the body as possible. If there was a hole in that, and some people do have a hole in their heart, quite a few people are born with it, it usually then kind of heals. But if you have a hole in your heart, you're going to get mixing of these bloods, so you're going to get slightly less oxygen going to the tissues, and that's not something that we want. Okay? Now, like I said, we kind of sort of have two pumps fused together, and that's because we have what's called a double circulatory system. So if we have a look at something that has a single circulatory system, like a fish, you have the heart, the blood leaves the heart, it goes to the exchange surface, which in this case would be the gills of a fish. It goes around the rest of the body to the tissues, delivering its oxygen before it comes back to the heart. So the blood just does one complete circuit all the way around the body, past where it's going to pick up its oxygen, past all the tissues where it drops off its oxygen, back to the heart. We have a double circulatory system. So you have your heart, and we pick up oxygen from the lungs, and then we deliver it to the body. So we have two branches of our circulatory system. We have what's called the pulmonary system. So blood leaves the heart, it goes to the lungs, it picks up the oxygen, it brings that oxygenated blood back into the heart, and then it leaves the heart again to go around the body to take that oxygen to those tissues. The oxygen is dropped off, and that deoxygenated blood comes back to the heart, comes back in here. So you have, if you followed the route of a red blood cell, you would come in from the body into the atrium, down into that right ventricle, and you'd be squeezed out through the pulmonary artery, pick up some oxygen, come back into the heart and the pulmonary vein, into that atrium, down into the ventricle, and again you'd be squeezed out to go around the body. So they are the two circuits. So the blood goes through the heart twice in each circuit. So it goes heart, lungs, heart, body. Heart, lungs, heart, body. So that's why it's known as a double circulatory system. Okay? So let's have a look at the valves in a little bit more detail, and let's have a look at the journey that the blood takes through the heart. So blood comes in through the vena cava and through the pulmonary vein at the same time. Comes into these atria at the same time. These valves, separating the atria from the ventricles, are open. Blood is able to flow down into these ventricles. Now when these ventricles start to squeeze and contract, they're going to push the blood upwards, and it's going to cause these cups to fill with blood, and it's actually going to shut those valves. Okay, so those valves are going to close. The blood cannot go back up into those atria. So the only route for the blood to take is to be squeezed out. We want it to go out through these arteries. So that squeezing of the ventricles actually opens these valves. And so those valves would kind of swing open like that, and your blood would be able to leave and go out through the arteries. So when the blood comes in, these valves are open to allow the blood to flow down, and these valves would be closed. So that allows blood in. When they start to squeeze, it shuts these valves and it opens these ones so the blood can leave. So the blood is only ever going one way. Okay? Now, the heart is what's called myogenic. It's made of special muscle called cardiac muscle, and it's called myogenic. Now what that means is it can initiate its own heartbeat. So your nervous system can increase the rate, how quickly your heart beats, and it can decrease the rate, how slowly, to bring it back down to normal. But the everyday kind of beating of your heart, 70 beats per minute every day, is set by the heart muscle itself. And that's controlled by a specially adapted collection of cells, which are called the pacemaker cells. Let me just get rid of that. So the pacemaker cells sit in that right atrium, and they initiate that heartbeat. So they are the ones that send impulses across the heart to get it to beat. If you take the heart out of the body, you can have it still beating in your hand. It doesn't need the nervous system in order to beat. It needs the nervous system to increase. It needs the nervous system to bring it back down to normal. The actual normal everyday heartbeat, your heart does itself. Now obviously, if it doesn't have oxygen and it doesn't have glucose, it's not going to do that for very long. So, what have we covered? We've covered the two sides to the heart. The left-hand side, oxygen-rich, thick wall. The right-hand side, deoxygenated, thinner wall. We've talked about why we've got these thick walls: to squeeze the blood around the body, to squeeze the blood just to the lungs. The atria, obviously thinner because they're just squeezing it down. We've talked about veins coming in. We've talked about arteries taking blood away. We've talked about the septum separating that blood. We've talked about that single and double circulatory system. And we've talked about the pacemaker cells. Okay?